India has lost about 1.3 crore jobs in the month of June, according to the latest data from CMIE. Now, this is in contrast to an improvement in the employment rates. Part of the reason for this loss of jobs is job losses in the agricultural sector in rural India due to seasonal reasons. But there are some bits of that data hidden in the top lines that need to be fleshed out further because it points to trouble in salaried jobs and in the manufacturing sector as well. To speak more on this, I am joined now by Mahesh Vyas, MD and CEO of CMIE, the agency that regularly puts out this data and is one of the most credible agencies and sources of employment data in the country. Mahesh, great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. Take us through the highlights of the data for the month of June.
Well, June turned out to be a disappointment, and I think we should still not be too worried about it. So although on the face of it, it looks like a terrible month, but I think we can be a little patient and it will work out quite okay by the end of July. So what happened is in the month of June, the labor participation rate fell, employment fell. So the fall in employment was quite significant. So 13 million job losses is not small. It wipes out all the gains that we made in the preceding 2 months, and we did gain a lot in the preceding 2 months. So on the face of it, it looks quite bad. But we find that all the losses in jobs were amongst small traders, wage laborers, and it looked like that they had quit their jobs as wage laborers where they were working as they were moving into the agricultural sector for becoming agricultural laborers, because that's what happens in June, sowing goes up. But rains were delayed, and therefore these people had to step back. And that's what led to the fall in employment and the fall in the labor participation rate.
But let's focus also, you're right, this is possibly bad weather, a seasonal issue that we've seen borne out. But what makes you optimistic that things will improve, Mahesh? And are we beginning to see the impact of high inflation, lower demand on job generation as well?
I'm optimistic because the rains have come back. So there was a lull for around 2 weeks in the middle of June. But by the end of June, the rains have come back. They have spread all over the country now. And therefore, we have also seen in the weekly data that the labor force participation rate in rural India has gone up. So the repair is already visible in the data if you go beyond just the monthly data of June. So I'm optimistic over there. I don't think high inflation, high interest rates is going to hurt employment so quickly. It will take a longer time for that to pan out to hit employment.
You know, in the interim, we're also seeing the startup new age stories sort of flounder. We've been seeing these reports of a large number of sackings in the startup space, cost cutting, etc. Now, as a part of the whole, it's a smaller proportion, but is it pointing to trouble at that end?
Yes, there is trouble over here. We did see a loss of 2 million jobs in salaried employees as well. But even that I will take with a pinch of salt, because in the preceding 2-3 months, salaried jobs have grown quite well. So this could be a temporary correction, which will come back to normalcy. But you are right in pointing out that the startups story floundering and also the Agniveer story panning out not quite to the satisfaction of the labor is a little worrisome. So if the intake from the government reduces compared to what the expectations were, if the intake from the private sector through startups reduces compared to what the expectations were, then hopes get dashed. And that's not a good thing to happen. It takes a long time for these things to get repaired. So it's a bit of a worry that avenues of good quality jobs are also kind of shrinking. You will see agricultural jobs come back. They're not the best quality jobs, but it certainly is worrying
Yeah.
that salary jobs have shrunk a bit, and government jobs and good quality jobs in the private sector also are shrinking.
You know, that's been the endemic issue as far as the Indian economy is concerned. And some of the policy response we see is to increase the pace of hiring in existing government job vacancies. Is that going to be enough beyond the point, Mahesh?
It's not about it's being enough or not. What's important is it's going to make a huge difference. You're probably alluding to the announcement of 1 million jobs being given in the next
Yes.
1.5 years. If the government actually does that, it'll make a huge impact. It's not a small impact, it's a very big thing. So just imagine there are about 400 million jobs out there. People are employed in that. And any increase of 1 million jobs is very difficult. An increase of 1 million jobs of good quality government jobs is going to make a huge difference. So if that happens, I think it will make a big difference to India.
Why do you think we are still seeing the allure of safe government jobs in the whole rash of protests post the Agniveer announcement? The underlying theme was that people were disappointed they would get less of these very secure government jobs, long-standing jobs. This even as the nature of jobs have changed. Do you think at some point the Indian employment market and those who are seeking jobs are going to be more and more out of sync with the realities of employability out there?
Well, the allure of government jobs has always been there. We have done surveys in the past to ask people what is your first preference of a job. Is it a government job or private job or self-employment? And government jobs win hands down across the country. So it's just been there for a fairly long time. We did the survey, I think, in 2017 or so, and we found this huge preference for government jobs. Now, in more recent times, the private sector has shown its inability to hire sufficient people. Also, the private sector has also shown its inability to retain people. So people lose jobs in private sector companies. So as the jobs in the private sector become scarcer, more demanding, and they become less secure, people feel it's much better for us to seek government jobs. So the allure for government jobs has increased in recent times because the private sector opportunities have shrunk and they have become more demanding.
I want to come back to the focus on high-paying, better quality, salaried jobs. Over the many months that we've been speaking, Mahesh, you've always talked about how the pace at which these kind of jobs are growing has been a worry. Do you see that easing overall as a trend, or is there still a question mark there?
Well, there has been some easing on that front. There was a pickup in salaried, good quality jobs in the months before June. So we did see a pickup, but it's not adequate. We're still far away from what we need to be as a country. Mind you, only 20% of all jobs are salaried jobs. That's pathetic, which means 80% of them are either entrepreneurs, not necessarily great entrepreneurs, they're just self-employed people, or they're daily wage workers. So I think we are really far from a situation where salary jobs will become the norm or decent jobs will become the norm. We have barely corrected for the damage we saw during the pandemic, barely corrected that. A pickup is still far away. That can only happen if investments pick up in a very big way, if investments in the private sector into large enterprises, not medium and small enterprises. It's the large enterprises that need to grow to provide salary jobs of good quality.
I want to move a little away from jobs and talk to you about an interesting data point that has emerged on how India will outpace China in being the most populous nation in the world. Now, there are different kinds of reactions which has come in to this bit of news. And there are some who believe that this is worrisome for a nation like India. There are some who believe that this is probably not such a bad thing if we can have that power of demographic dividend. What do you make of this, Mahesh?
Well, this was bound to happen, that we would become a more populous country than China. This was elementary demographics. I think this has been a demographic dividend opportunity. You have a large number of people who come into the labor force, they become available to get employed. Their employment creates income for them and generates savings for them that will then go into investments and will help them in their future, in their old age. So when you have a large number of people of this kind, it helps the economy grow much faster. Just imagine, we have a labor participation rate for women that's really very low. We think it's around 10%. The government believes it's around 22%, 25% or so. Imagine if that goes up to, say, 35% that Bangladesh is at. There are so many more women who will go and earn, and that's how their households will become more prosperous. The country will become much more prosperous. But if we don't provide that employment, we not only lose an opportunity, but we also run the risks of stalling our growth process. And if this continues the way it is, it can become a demographic disaster. It can lead to people being dissatisfied with the economic conditions in the country. So it is a demographic dividend, which if you do not exploit, can become a demographic disaster.
You know, in terms of policy to address this, you talked about Bangladesh, you talked about the labor force participation rate coming down in the month of June. What do you think need to be the policy measures to this, Mahesh? Of course, the immediate booster is filling up government vacancies. You talked about how that would have a great impact. But longer term, what do you think needs to be done?
The most sustainable way of doing this is to create an environment where the private sector is very enthused to invest into large capacities. So manufacturing requires to be given a big boost. So we had Made in India, we have got PLI schemes, but they're not adequate. We still require a much bigger boost so that people, private entrepreneurs, do invest into large capacities that are employment generating. So we are not investing enough as a country. Our investment to GDP ratio is still not adequate. Our growth rate is not adequate and employment generating. So the only sustainable solution towards employment is private sector investment boost. We require to do that on a war footing. We require to create the environment that private enterprise feels very enthusiastic to create large-scale capacities.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That was Mahesh Vyas there breaking down the latest data, which on the face of it looks quite alarming, but it seems like it's a trend that could reverse because it is based on a delayed monsoon, which seems to have picked up now. Thank you so much for speaking with us.